Hey, do you know everything you should know about homeowners associations and those things they call CC&Rs? When you bought a house, I bet there's things you didn't find out that you wish you had, but nothing like what you're going to hear today. So listen in, because this is a good one. Welcome today. It's David Cathers from Gig Harbor, Washington. I'm a realtor here, and each week we provide more informational videos, and as I said, you aren't going to want to miss this one today. So please, if this is your first time, go ahead and subscribe, hit that button, hit that little bell, and let's get us started here. Thanks. Hey, welcome back. It's David Cathers once again, and we're here with a special guest, Juanita Carbaugh of HOA Community Solutions. And what got me interested in having you get together is Juanita's one day sitting there at Rotary breakfast, asking Juanita about what she does and working with HOAs, and we're going to find out even more. But she said one of the funny things that caught my attention was you said sometimes a neighborhood will decide they're going to have an HOA, and what they do, they brought you this documents from the neighborhood that's the next block over. They've just copied it, still left the same names in, didn't even put the new names, which that just kind of got me going, well, shows you how strong some of these HOA are. So rather than me ramble, I wanted to bring Juanita in to tell you, because there's a lot more to this than you probably didn't know, and we're going to break this into two parts, two videos, so we'll be able to put one up here that you can see. But again, Juanita, welcome, and maybe what's the question you might ask?
Sure. HOAs are interesting animals for sure, and we would tell people to ask really two questions before you move into a community that has an HOA. And the first question would be, can I live with these CC&Rs? So CC&Rs are your covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and those really are all of the rights that a homeowner has, as well as all the restrictions that are placed upon you. So we would recommend that folks read those carefully and make sure they can live within those restrictions. A lot of people assume an HOA is just simply about aesthetics and keeping your yard nice and your house painted and curb appeal and all of that, but it truly is, in this day and age, you're finding CC&Rs that are very unique. We have, as I mentioned earlier to you offline, we have smoke-free campuses, so we have communities where you're not allowed to smoke anywhere on the property, including inside the person's unit. And we also have a lot of rules around pets and how many pets you can have, how much they can weigh, and even certain breeds of pets. So it's very, very important that you read those thoroughly, that you understand them, you understand what you're getting into. So that's the first part, and we can talk about that more, especially if you have any specific questions on that. And then the second piece of it is the association's financial health, because ultimately you become a member of that association. So think of it like you're on a board of directors or any other legal body. You are a member. So if it's a 10-unit community, you own 1/10 of everything, and you're going to share 1/10 of that responsibility. So truly being educated as you walk into the sales process is important. And perhaps, a lot of people, I think, find you might move into an HOA and maybe it appears that the rules haven't been upheld. The property doesn't look as nice as you think it should when you read the documents and you see that there are rules about lawns being mowed and kept green and keeping your lawn edged and your house painted, but you drive in and you see evidence that perhaps those things weren't supported, and that's common because the HOA is governed by a group of volunteers like you and like me who may be busy and may make some choices that they're not going to uphold the CC&Rs perhaps as fervently as others would. So
there's two things we're going to kind of hit on. CC&Rs are part of the HOA. If I understand what most of the time I would think of it, or most of my clients would say is, oh, I can't paint the door a certain color, or I can't leave my garbage cans out, I think you mentioned overnight, or trash cars in the driveway. Those are the common things we kind of think about, but you said there's a little more to that.
There is. We have seen CC&Rs that limit, street parking. So if the roads are private roads, they're often not very wide. They're often quite narrow, and so you'll find limitations on street parking. We've seen CC&Rs that limit how long you can leave your car in your own driveway, which is private property, but they can still regulate that if they choose to, if the CC&Rs say that they can. So it's very common to find in this day and age, again, big houses with little garages, and a family that might have a teenage driver plus two working parents, and maybe they have 3 SUVs, and there's no way they're going to get them into their garage. The CC&Rs might say that they're not allowed to permanently store a vehicle in their driveway, and there's no street parking. So just things like that, you need to really think it through, and just because a board isn't enforcing a rule today doesn't mean that come the next election that they won't be enforcing it, and a new board might be much more stringent in following the CC&Rs.
And does the board is usually just members of the community that live there, right? They're all volunteer. Nobody's necessarily being paid for this.
Exactly.
But they've got there must be a set of rules. And does the state govern that, or who kind of governs it?
Great
Says
question.
You can only have certain things in your CC&Rs.
Sure. So there's a lot of different documents that come into play for an HOA. So your CC&Rs is our holy grail. That's that's the most important document. It talks about your rights and all the restrictions. But the board itself and how they operate, that's governed through the bylaws for the association and through Washington state laws. So the Revised Code of Washington has an entire chapter on HOAs and how they are to operate. So you have to have an annual meeting every year. A lot of little associations that don't have management companies like us telling them to do this don't understand they should be having a meeting of the membership every year, because again, as members in an HOA, you're stakeholders, and you share a percentage of the liability, you share a percentage of the ownership of common property, and it's important that the members are getting together to meet and do business, and electing a board that you feel represents your interests.
What about when you get a few more people moving into the neighborhood and say, I don't want to deal with an HOA? I mean, is there can they get the HOA or the CCRs canceled or something like that?
That's a great question. So it can be done, but it isn't easy. So in your CC&Rs, it'll usually talk towards the very end of the document, and it's a 60-page, sometimes legal document, so it's a lot to weed through. But at the very back, it will talk about potentially disintegrating the corporation, and how would you do that. And if you own your own common areas, so if you own common property together with the other owners, like roads, parks, in our area here in the Key Peninsula area, a lot of people own their own water systems, their own sewer systems. Okay. So if you own that kind of common property, you would be very, very hard pressed to find a government entity willing to take that on for you. And if you're going to abandon your HOA, the first thing is if you wanted the county to take on your roads or something, you would have to bring them up to code. So
that's out of your own pocket.
Out of the homeowner's pocket. So we had a community here in Gig Harbor that had private roads. They wanted the county to take it. At that time, the county said, yes, we will. Actually, I think it might have been the city of Gig Harbor. But anyway, they said, yes, they would take it as long as you widen the road, put in sidewalks, put in catch basins, and put in, all of the things that are now code, a bike lane, and by that time the homeowners would have lost so much front yard, and I think the price tag per homeowner was, upwards of probably $30,000. They just decided this wasn't worth it for them. And truly, your CC&Rs, they are recorded with the plat, and so they run. There's a terminology that you'll hear in the industry saying they run with the land, which means they are eternally binding as long as the land exists. It is bound by these covenants unless you basically disband in accordance with how the governing documents tell you can. And as I said, the process may be spelled out, and usually what that means is if you own a park or you own common property, you would have to sell the interest in it. If it's roads, you'd have to get the county to take it. If you own a water system, you'd have to find a water company like Rainier or somebody to take that water system on.
Is there You said something earlier when we first introduced you about 10 units. Is there a number that goes with how many homes can create a HOA or do for CCRs? Or is that a
No, that's a
okay?
great question. These days, what we're seeing is that the county doesn't want anyone to build without an HOA. So we're seeing, unless you buy one single lot that you plop it into an area where there's already a good infrastructure in place, then they'll probably let that happen. But if you own a small piece of property and you just want to put in a cul-de-sac with 3 or 4 homes, they're going to require an HOA in almost every instance, unless the developer at the time they platted is willing to put everything up to code. Otherwise, I think our government is taxed with responsibilities, and they don't want any more responsibilities, and they don't want to maintain any more roads, and they don't want to have to worry about plowing your roads when there's a heavy snow and chip sealing your road, every 10 years or whatever they would be obligated to do if they were public roads. So we're seeing more and more, same thing with lighting. We'll see a lot of communities where the county says that, we'll give you the permit developer to build here, but it'll be private roads. You will take care of your own lighting, and all of those issues. And the parks are, if you want to put in a playground, it's all going to be owned by the homeowners. I just think the government is getting out of management of homes and communities.
Okay. Anything else that clicks to you as far as the CC&R?
I would just say it's a great question. I would say if you find a home you love and you can live with those CC&Rs, but maybe you don't think the board is enforcing them properly, maybe you think they're not enforcing them at all, or perhaps you're on the other end of the spectrum and you think they're enforcing them too strictly. I wouldn't let that scare you off from living in the community or purchasing a home there, but I would say don't move into an HOA if you're not willing to get involved. So it's important to step up and be willing to help introduce change, and help foster change. So these communities can be great places to live, and many of them are, but sometimes they need you as a volunteer and as a homeowner to take an active interest in making it a better place to live.
And so, kind of in summary of that, one of the benefits of the HOA, when everybody puts the block in there, benefit of the HOA would be the fact that there's a consistency in how things are taken care of, which is going to help increase or hold the values of your neighborhood. I think that's probably
Yes, I think if you're enforcing your CC&Rs and you're holding everyone to the expectations they're in, your property values should hold, they should be maintained. It's hard when you're governing your neighbors. When you're on a board and you have to say, wow, we're not putting enough money away to keep our roads paved and our common areas and things looking sharp. Entrance signs, they can turn green and get ugly, and there's a lot of things that can happen there. But and we see communities start to age if we're not putting enough money aside to take care of them. So, but it's really hard when you're on the board to raise assessments for your neighbor because, hey, nobody wants to raise your dues, right? They don't want to raise your assessments because you're their friend too, but the responsible thing to do is to make sure that you're taking care of property if you really want to keep your values up.
Cool. So the next thing we want to do, because we said we're going to do this in 2 parts, so you're going to want to watch closely here because there's the second part of this now, right?
Yes.
And that would be what?
So the part 2, so the part 1 was know your CC&Rs and understand them. Part 2 is know the community's financial health. So, and I had shared with you off camera, but
now we're going to share on camera.
Now we're going to share on camera. So
listen close.
Yes. So I bought a home, back in 2003 here in the harbor, and I read through the CC&Rs. I was certain that I could live with the guidelines therein. But what I didn't do is I didn't look at what the community owned as far as common property and its financial health. And so I moved in April, and in July, our water system failed. So I heard some alarms, and people said, hey, that means the well's going dry. It's July. I went into my house, turned on the kitchen sink, and nothing came out.
All right, so here's where you want to click on to the other video, and what we're going to talk about homeowners associations. And as I said,